The Galactic Military Academy was a place of legendary renown, drawing in the brightest and bravest from across the vast expanse of the Milky Way. It was an institution designed to push boundaries, to make warriors of the finest raw material the galaxy could offer, and to create leaders capable of navigating interstellar conflicts with tactical brilliance. For centuries, its ranks had seen cadets from the Eerie Exos, the sleek and calculating race known for their piercing intelligence, the Viranax, towering and nearly invincible, with an instinct for brute strength, and the gentle but hyper-intelligent Arkoyans, whose skills with mathematics and data manipulation were unmatched. This year, however, something unprecedented was happening. For the first time in the Academy's illustrious history, a small group of human cadets from Earth had been invited to participate in the Academy's high-level training exercise, a grueling test of endurance, creativity, and raw intellect. The decision to invite humans had not been without controversy. Many questioned whether Earthlings, hailing from a relatively young and inexperienced species, could handle the rigors of such an advanced exercise. And it wasn't just any exercise they were participating in, it was the infamous Taron defense simulation. Taron was a barren, inhospitable rock of a planet on the outskirts of the galaxy, where nothing but dust and stone stretched to the horizon. Its surface was littered with craters and ancient ruins from millennia-old battles, a silent testament to the planet's harsh history. The Taron defense simulation was the ultimate challenge, a tactical exercise that tested a team's ability to create a planetary defense system from scratch. Each team was given just 1 hour to complete the task with minimal resources and no instructions. It was, by all measures, a near impossible task. The alien generals who had gathered to observe the exercise watched in silence as the teams were briefed and led to their designated starting points. Each team was composed of elite cadets from various alien species, and the human team was the smallest of them all, consisting of only 3 individuals. These young cadets had been handpicked from Earth's most prestigious institutions, each with skills and qualities that made them stand out among their peers. As the briefing concluded, General Krek of the Viranax, a towering figure with an imposing presence, exchanged a skeptical glance with General Zao of the Arkoyans. Both had been wary of including humans in this exercise. Zao, whose smooth, silver skin glistened faintly in the dim light of the planet's atmosphere, leaned over and muttered in a voice barely above a whisper, "They won't last 10 minutes." Krek grunted in agreement, his deep-set eyes narrowing as he looked at the human team. Let them try. Perhaps they'll learn the limits of their species. The generals had seen countless cadets attempt this exercise, only for most of them to fail spectacularly. The Eerie Exos, renowned for their precision and calculation, often faltered under the intense time constraints. The Viranax, despite their brute strength, struggled to channel their power into efficient, intricate designs. The Arkoyans, with their unmatched intellect, were known to overanalyze the situation, often spending too much time on complex designs and falling short on execution. The human team, though small, looked oddly calm. As they took their place on the barren field where they would begin the exercise, the team leader, a young woman named Sarah, knelt down to inspect the materials they had been provided. Strewn across the ground were scraps of metal, outdated circuits, a few power cells, and an assortment of data processors that looked like they hadn't been touched in centuries. Sarah's eyes narrowed thoughtfully as she surveyed the limited resources at her disposal. Beside her, her teammates James, an engineer with a knack for improvisation, and Priya, a tech whiz who could program just about anything given a half-functioning processor, were already discussing ideas in hushed tones. "All right," Sarah murmured, her gaze sweeping over the materials before them. "Let's not waste time. We need to break down the basics of what a planetary defense system requires." James crouched down beside her, running a hand over the dusty circuits. "Power, targeting, and shielding," he replied confidently. "We'll need some sort of detection system for incoming threats, an automated response capability, and at least a basic shield field. Otherwise, it'll be useless." "Exactly," Priya agreed, picking up one of the processors and examining it closely. But these processors, they're ancient. We'll need to reprogram them completely if we want them to handle the calculations for targeting and shielding at the same time. Sarah nodded, her mind racing. They had less than an hour to complete this task, and time was already ticking. Let's split up. Priya, you handle the programming. James, focus on setting up the power grid. I'll work on the structural layout and connect everything together once you're done. The generals observing the human team watched with a mixture of curiosity and condescension. Many of them had assumed that the humans would be overwhelmed by the complexity of the task and the limited materials provided. General Krek chuckled under his breath as he watched the humans dive straight into the exercise, already assembling components with a calm efficiency that was unexpected. But as the minutes ticked by, the humans' progress became difficult to ignore. While other teams were still arguing over the layout or struggling with their own complex designs, the human team had already set up a rudimentary power grid using the outdated power cells. James worked with a quiet intensity, connecting circuits and testing connections with remarkable speed. Meanwhile, Priya had managed to hack into one of the ancient processors and was reprogramming it to handle the dual functions of targeting and shielding. Her fingers flew over the controls, her mind racing as she bypassed the old protocols and created new subroutines that would allow the processor to operate at twice its original capacity. Sarah, on the other hand, was piecing together the structure of the defense system, using metal scraps to form a framework that would support the shield emitters and targeting array. Her design was simple but effective, a stark contrast to the more elaborate and complicated designs that the other teams were attempting. As they worked, the generals began to exchange uneasy glances. It was clear that the human team was moving at a pace that none of them had anticipated. While the other teams struggled with their designs, debating each step and overanalyzing every decision, the humans seemed to have a clear plan and were executing it with remarkable precision. 30 minutes into the exercise, General Zeo found himself leaning forward, his silver skin glinting under the harsh light of the planet's atmosphere. The human team had already constructed a functional power grid, a targeting system, and had even managed to activate a basic shielding array. It was a feat that few cadets from any species had ever accomplished in such a short time. What are they doing? General Krek muttered, his deep voice laced with disbelief. How are they moving so fast? Zeo shook his head, his usually composed expression betraying a hint of confusion. It seems they're improvising. They aren't following any standard design protocols. The realization sent a ripple of unease through the generals. Improvisation was a skill that many of the older, more rigid species lacked. They were accustomed to strict adherence to tradition and protocol, relying on established methods and practices. But the humans, it seemed, had no such limitations. They adapted to the situation, using whatever was at their disposal without hesitation. With each passing minute, the human team's defense system took shape. Their shield emitters flickered to life, creating a shimmering barrier that enveloped the designated area. The targeting array, though rudimentary, was fully functional, capable of detecting and tracking incoming threats with surprising accuracy. By the time the hour was up, the human team had completed their planetary defense system. It was far from perfect, but it was functional, efficient, and built entirely from scrap. As the final seconds ticked away, Sarah activated the system, and a low hum filled the air as the shield emitters powered up and the targeting array began scanning the empty skies. The alien generals could only stare in stunned silence as the humans stood back, their defense system fully operational. It was a sight none of them had anticipated: a team of young, inexperienced humans achieving what many of the galaxy's most advanced species had failed to do. As the other teams scrambled to finish their own systems, the human team waited, their expressions calm but determined. They had faced the impossible challenge, and against all odds, had triumphed. For the first time in the history of the Galactic Military Academy, Humans had not only participated but had set a new standard, one that would be remembered for generations to come. With the first half of the simulation completed, and the human success sparking both awe and unease among the alien generals, an unusual silence settled over the observation area. The other teams, each representing the elite of their respective civilizations, had finally completed the preliminary structures of their defense systems, but it was clear that their progress lagged far behind the humans. The alien cadets, once full of confidence, now looked uncertain, stealing glances at the human team as they continued refining and testing their setup with a calm efficiency. On the ground, the human cadets felt the weight of the attention focused on them. They could sense the eyes of their alien counterparts on their every movement, observing their methods, their strategies, and their quiet resolve. While other teams argued or hesitated over each component and strategy, the human team worked in near silence, driven by a shared understanding of the task at hand and a commitment to maximizing their limited resources. Sarah, the team leader, stood back for a moment to survey their defense system. Despite the scarcity of their materials, they had managed to pull together a rough but functional array. A shiver of pride ran down her spine as she glanced at her teammates, who were as determined as she was to see this through to the end. "All right, team," she called, her voice steady. "We've got the basics in place. Shielding is operational and the power system is steady. Now we need to test the targeting array." Priya, the team's technical expert, nodded as she made a final adjustment to the processor she'd repurposed for the targeting system. Her fingers flew over the controls, inputting sequences to recalibrate the system's sensors. "It's not perfect," she admitted, her brow furrowing in concentration, "but it should pick up any objects moving within a 20-kilometer radius." James, who had worked on stabilizing the power grid, crouched beside her, examining the circuit board with a critical eye. "As long as it's enough to detect incoming threats, it should serve its purpose," he said. "We don't have to make it pretty. We just need it to work." Sarah chuckled, casting a quick glance toward the generals, who were still murmuring amongst themselves. "If it's functional, it'll be enough to surprise them," she said quietly. She could see the disbelief in their expressions, the way they seemed caught off guard by the humans' ability to adapt and innovate. But their task was far from over. The Tarkon defense simulation was designed to test not only their building skills but their adaptability under pressure. As if to punctuate that thought, a loud alarm echoed through the simulation field, signaling the beginning of the next phase. Phase 2 initiated. The mechanical voice of the Academy's AI intoned. "Incoming simulated threats detected. Cadets, prepare to defend your positions." The human team exchanged glances, their expressions hardening as they readied themselves for the next challenge. They knew that this was the true test of their system, the moment when all their hard work would be put to the test. Almost immediately, a series of red blips appeared on their targeting array, signaling the approach of simulated threats. Priya's eyes flickered over the readouts, her fingers adjusting the sensors to fine-tune the targeting as the blips drew closer. "They're coming in fast," she reported, her voice calm, despite the tension that hung in the air. Multiple targets closing in from the east. James's jaw tightened as he checked the power readings, ensuring that the shield emitters had enough energy to withstand an initial barrage. "Shields are stable," he confirmed, his voice steady. "We should be able to deflect at least a few direct hits." Sarah's gaze was fixed on the horizon, where the first of the simulated drones appeared, small, agile machines designed to mimic real combat conditions. The drones were equipped with lasers that, while harmless in simulation mode, would register as damaging hits on their defense system if they broke through the shields. "All right, here we go," Sarah murmured, gripping the edge of the control panel as the first drones descended upon their position. "Priya, activate the targeting system. Let's see if it works." Priya's fingers danced over the controls, and the targeting array hummed to life, tracking the incoming drones with a surprisingly high degree of accuracy. She watched with a mixture of relief and satisfaction as the system locked onto the nearest drone, sending a simulated missile toward it. The missile struck the drone dead on, causing it to explode in a shower of sparks. Priya couldn't help but grin. "That's one down," she said, her voice triumphant. "The targeting system works." The generals, who had been observing in silence, exchanged astonished glances. General Zao leaned forward, his silver skin catching the light as he watched the humans repel the first wave of drones with a precision that rivaled that of the more advanced teams. "It seems the humans have exceeded our expectations," he murmured, almost to himself. "Their system is functional." General Krek grunted, his expression one of reluctant admiration. "Functional, yes, but let's see how it holds up under sustained pressure." As if on cue, the simulation's AI intensified the difficulty, sending a second, larger wave of drones from multiple directions. The human team immediately felt the strain as the targeting system struggled to keep up with the increased number of targets. Priya's fingers flew over the controls as she tried to recalibrate the sensors, but the array was beginning to falter under the weight of so many simultaneous threats. "They're coming in from all sides," she called out, frustration lacing her voice. "I can't keep up with this many targets." Sarah's mind raced as she surveyed the battlefield, analyzing their options. The other teams were facing similar difficulties, with several of them visibly struggling to maintain their defense systems under the onslaught. She knew they couldn't afford to falter now, not when they were so close to proving themselves. "James," she said sharply, her tone decisive, "can you reroute some of the power from the shield emitters to the targeting system? It might give us the extra boost we need to track all the drones." James hesitated for a moment, glancing at the power readings. "It's risky," he warned. "If we draw too much power, the shields could fail." Sarah clenched her fists, weighing the risks. "It's a chance we'll have to take," she said firmly. "We can't let them overwhelm us. Do it." With a nod, James set to work, diverting a portion of the power from the shields to the targeting array. As he made the adjustments, the targeting system's response time improved, allowing Priya to lock onto multiple drones simultaneously. The risk was high, but it was a calculated one, exactly the kind of decision the generals hadn't expected humans to make. As the drones closed in, Sarah's voice cut through the tension. "Hold your positions. Stay focused. We're almost there." One by one, the drones fell, their simulated explosions lighting up the desolate landscape. But the strain on the defense system was beginning to take its toll, and Sarah knew they couldn't keep this up indefinitely. "We're reaching our limit," Priya warned, her voice tight with exhaustion. "If they send another wave, we might not be able to hold them off." Sarah nodded grimly, her mind racing as she considered their options. She knew that the next wave would be the most difficult yet, and that their success or failure would hinge on their ability to adapt to the ever-increasing pressure. As if sensing their resolve, the simulation's AI unleashed a third wave, this time composed of larger, more heavily armored drones. The human team tensed as they watched the drones approach, their massive forms casting long shadows across the barren landscape. "This is it," Sarah said, her voice barely a whisper. "We hold them here, or we fail." James and Priya exchanged a determined glance, their exhaustion forgotten as they readied themselves for the final push. They knew that the odds were against them, but they were prepared to give everything they had to complete the task. With a fierce determination, they threw themselves into the battle, each one pushing their limits as they fought to maintain the defense system. Priya's fingers blurred over the controls as she tracked each incoming drone, her focus unbreakable. James monitored the power levels, making rapid adjustments to keep the system from overloading. And Sarah, their unyielding leader, directed their every move, her voice a steady anchor in the chaos. The alien generals watched in stunned silence as the human team repelled wave after wave, their defense system holding strong against the relentless onslaught. It was a feat that defied all expectations, a testament to the humans' resilience, their ingenuity, and their refusal to accept defeat. By the time the final drone fell, the human team was exhausted but victorious. They had done what many had considered impossible. They had built and defended a planetary defense system with nothing but scrap materials and sheer determination. As the simulation ended and the battlefield fell silent, the human team stood together, their faces alight with a quiet pride. They had proven themselves in the eyes of the galaxy's most formidable leaders, and in doing so, had earned a place in the annals of galactic history. The barren expanse of Tarkon's surface had fallen quiet once again, as the final drones disintegrated in simulated explosions. The human cadets Sarah, James, and Priya stood panting, worn from the relentless waves but filled with an unmistakable sense of pride and accomplishment. For the past hour, they had been tested beyond their limits, forced to dig deeper than they had ever been pushed before. They had transformed metal scraps and outdated circuits into a functional planetary defense system and withstood an onslaught of simulated attacks that few teams in the history of the Galactic Military Academy had managed to repel. As the dust began to settle, the holographic drones disappeared from sight, their simulations officially over. The other teams, including cadets from the most advanced civilizations, stared at the human group in silence, their expressions a mix of awe, disbelief, and a grudging admiration. They had all seen the impossible happen. Humans, a species that many in the galaxy still viewed as young and underdeveloped, had just completed one of the Academy's most difficult exercises with unmatched skill. From the observation platform above, the alien generals exchanged uneasy glances. General Zao, usually unshakable in his confidence, found himself at a rare loss for words. His silver eyes, typically cold and calculating, betrayed an uncharacteristic astonishment as he surveyed the scene below. General Krek, a hulking Vernax with a reputation for his relentless pursuit of strength and victory, simply folded his arms, narrowing his deep-set eyes as he tried to reconcile the unexpected outcome with his own biases. In the moments that followed, the Academy's chief instructor, a respected elder named Orlun, emerged from the shadows and walked slowly across the rocky field toward the human cadets. His figure, tall and dignified, moved with a grace that belied his advanced age, and as he drew closer, Sarah straightened, her team following suit. Though tired, they each stood tall, exuding a quiet confidence that spoke to their accomplishment. Orlun stopped a few feet from the group, his sharp gaze sweeping over each of them, measuring them with the wisdom of centuries. Finally, Orlun's voice broke the silence, calm yet resonant. "I've seen many cadets face the Tarkon defense simulation over the decades," he said, his tone both impressed and curious, "but never have I seen a team completed in the manner you have today. You achieved not just functionality, but efficiency, adapting and improvising beyond the limits of the materials provided." James, who had been fighting to catch his breath, shared a glance with Sarah, feeling a sense of validation he hadn't expected. The cadets were used to proving themselves on Earth, but here, amidst legends of the galactic ranks, their achievement took on a different weight. Orlun studied them for a moment longer before gesturing to the observation platform. "The generals are eager to speak with you." His gaze softened slightly, and he added, almost as an afterthought, "This is not an opportunity given lightly. Follow me." As the human cadets climbed the steps to the observation platform, they couldn't ignore the intense stares of the other alien cadets and generals around them. Many regarded them with open curiosity, others with a barely concealed frustration at being outperformed by a team they had expected would struggle. Sarah kept her focus forward, urging herself and her teammates to ignore the attention and maintain their composure. They had earned this, she reminded herself, and they were about to face an even greater challenge defending their methods to the most powerful military minds in the galaxy. The platform was a semicircular arrangement of viewing seats and consoles, with a raised area in the center where the generals typically reviewed the exercises. Zao and Krek stood side by side, their faces set in an unreadable expression as the human team approached. A third general, an elegant Arcadian woman with sharp, inquisitive eyes, joined them, her posture relaxed but her gaze penetrating as she assessed the cadets. General Zao spoke first, his voice low and smooth. "I'll admit," he began, "that I held certain expectations about your species' performance in this exercise. I expected resourcefulness, yes, but what you displayed goes beyond simple adaptation. What exactly were you thinking when you decided to," he gestured to the makeshift planetary defense system below, "repurpose ancient power cells and use outdated processors for dual functions? How could you trust such crude methods to withstand our attacks?" Priya, who had been tinkering with the targeting system until the last possible moment, stepped forward slightly. Her voice was calm, but there was a spark in her eyes as she explained. "We knew the processors were limited," she said, glancing from Zao to the other generals. "But we didn't need them to perform at peak efficiency. We just needed them to meet a basic threshold. By bypassing certain protocols and creating simpler subroutines, I was able to redirect processing power to more critical functions, like targeting and tracking." Zao's brow furrowed. He glanced at the other generals, who nodded slightly, recognizing the ingenuity of Priya's approach. General Krek, however, remained skeptical. "And what of the shields?" he asked, his tone challenging. "They held for longer than I would have anticipated, even with the power fluctuations you must have experienced. You diverted power between systems mid-simulation. Was that not a risk you were unwilling to take?" James, who had overseen the power management of the system, spoke up, his tone steady. "It was a risk, yes," he admitted, "but calculated. We knew that if we spread our resources too thin, we'd lose both offensive and defensive capabilities. By diverting power strategically and shifting it to the targeting array only when absolutely necessary, we maximized efficiency. We trusted that our shielding, though not the strongest, would hold under those conditions." Krek's eyes narrowed, but there was a glimmer of respect in his gaze as he listened to James's explanation. The general might have prided himself on brute strength, but he couldn't deny the effectiveness of the human strategy. Finally, General Zao nodded slowly, his earlier skepticism giving way to a more contemplative expression. "You took what we believed to be an impossible task," he said, "and accomplished it in a way that not even the most advanced teams here could match. Your methods may be unorthodox, but they speak to a type of tactical brilliance that is rarely seen. You have shown us that your people possess a unique way of thinking, one that defies conventional logic." The Arcadian general, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke, her voice soft but filled with admiration. "Humans have long been regarded as adaptable, but today you have shown us that you are also unpredictable in a way that could change the future of this academy and perhaps the future of interstellar alliances." She gave them a small, approving nod. "For that, you have earned our respect." The cadets felt a wave of pride surge through them at the general's words. They had come here as the underdogs, uncertain of how they would fare against the best and brightest in the galaxy. But now, standing before these esteemed leaders, they knew that they had done more than simply pass a test. They had challenged the preconceptions of those who held the power to shape galactic history. Orlun, the Academy's chief instructor, took a step forward, addressing the cadets with a faint smile. "In light of your exceptional performance, the Academy has decided to award you with a commendation reserved for the highest level of achievement in this simulation. You have not only completed the Tarkon defense simulation, but have set a new standard for what is possible." He extended his hand, and the human cadets stepped forward, each shaking his hand in turn. The gesture, though simple, was laden with meaning. They had proven themselves in the eyes of the galaxy's most respected leaders, and that recognition was more valuable than any trophy or medal. But as the ceremony came to a close, Sarah's mind drifted to the future. She knew that this was only the beginning, that their performance here would open doors and opportunities she hadn't dared to dream of. And as she glanced at her teammates who shared her determination, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. The galaxy was vast and filled with challenges, but now, with their new allies and the respect of the Galactic Military Academy, she knew that humanity's place among the stars was secure. In the days following the simulation, word of the humans' victory spread throughout the Academy and beyond. Cadets from various species approached them, some with questions, others with admiration, and a few with barely hidden resentment. The human cadets, however, remained humble, choosing to focus on their studies and training rather than basking in their newfound fame. Soon, offers began to pour in from across the galaxy. Representatives from advanced civilizations invited them to collaborate on research projects, while military leaders sought their insights on unconventional tactics. The humans had become a symbol of possibility, a reminder that even the youngest species could contribute something valuable to the galaxy. For Sarah, James, and Priya, the experience had changed them forever. They knew that they were no longer just cadets from Earth, they were now ambassadors of humanity, tasked with forging connections and strengthening alliances across the stars. And though the challenges ahead would be great, they were ready to face them, armed with the knowledge that they had earned their place in the galaxy. As they prepared to leave the academy and embark on new journeys, Sarah couldn't help but look back at the desolate expanse of Tarkon one last time. It was here that they had proven themselves, here that they had faced the impossible and emerged victorious. And as she turned to join her teammates, she smiled, knowing that the best was yet to come.